Such fun editing this week. It's been so great doing these podcasts.
You were born out of earth.
So it seems that in my 60th year I discover what I was born for. Squeak, squeak.
We're doing all the things now that we should have been doing in our teens. But that's all right. We're late bloomers.
It's not really that we're late bloomers. It's just that we took an alternative route. We took the scenic route, and we got here more experience than most teenagers.
Yeah, we're better at it. We have our own stories.
Methods of seeing and perceiving and understanding. And it's wonderful to learn all these new technologies, honestly. I find it very difficult to learn it. It's not wonderful to learn it. But having learned it, the sort of opportunities that it opens up are so unexpected, I think, for me. I expected Star Wars. I didn't expect this. I was well programmed, wasn't I, by the television?
We all were, I think.
Yeah, I suppose so. Isn't it strange? There was only one show back then. There was no YouTube where you could just scroll through and choose what you wanted to watch.
Getting back to the house in time to watch Star Trek. Me and my housemates would all wait for Star Trek. We'd love the old episodes, and we used to watch The Next Generation, although that really is far inferior. It did have one wonderful moment in it, but I've got to, one of these days, I got to track down the episode and just excerpt it, because Patrick Stewart is very left-wing liberal and very anti-Trump. A lot of actors are, but he did a show. The Next Generation was very woke in many ways, but there was a great scene when there were these American Indians, and these American Indians were like, settle their own planet, but they did it illegally. And this planet had been given to like the Cardassians or one of those evil races that they had to replace the Yons with because they needed villains. So Picard goes to see the Indians and he's, look, you can't stay here no more. This is in a debated territory. This planet has been given to the Cardassians, and the agreement was that there would be no one here. If you're still here when they get here, they're probably going to kill you. And they're like, no, it's our land. Blah, blah, blah. Never mind, they'd only been there for 50 years or something, or 100 years. So finally, the Indian chief, he's negotiating with one of the chiefs, says, you know what, we found out something about you, Picard. We researched you. And it turns out that your ancestor was in Pizarro's mission to the southwest, which of course was evil Spanish colonizers or something like that. So now you have a chance to make up for what your ancestor did. Now you can atone for this and let us stay here and protect us and this and that. And then they leave, and his first officer says, sir, is this true? Yeah, probably. I don't know. He says, what about their argument? And he says, it specifically says in Federation law that no person can be held responsible for any act of anyone of their race or something like that. And that goes so against the social justice theory. That was years ago before they developed all this thing of collective white guilt and reparations and stuff like that. It was presenting that attitude and explicitly denying it, saying, no, you can't hold me responsible for what other white people did. And I would just love to ask him what he thinks of that. At that time, very considerable left-wing opinion. Now it's considered to be words of a Nazi. Literally Hitler. Picard is literally Hitler. Look at that mustache.
I love Patrick Stewart. He's
a fine actor.
I saw him do a talk once when I was still right in the depths of trying to deal with domestic violence issues. And he gave this amazing talk that just changed my life. He said, my dad was in the army and I grew up watching him rough my mum around. It was really horrible. I've grown up knowing that I don't want this to happen for my mother or my sisters or my daughters. I've come to the conclusion that domestic violence isn't a family issue, it's a man issue. Us men have to get all together and we have to stand together to protect our women and children. When we do that, we stamp out domestic violence. And he's been my hero ever since he gave that speech.
A lot of it is, and I think this is something I was raised with, and I think it used to be a usual thing. I know Gene Wolfe has talked about it, and it has to do with being raised that you do not harm. If you're a man, you don't harm women. You are there to protect women. And the idea, I told you that story, and they were explaining in the Eddas, some of Maria Quillhog did a video about it, actually, I think, in Scandinavian society, where the women very often could use weapons too, and they would join in a fight if their husband or brother or someone was in trouble, and they would cut off a couple of arms of the other guys before they would stop her because they could not harm her. And nick her skin would make you the most despised person. There was this immense social pressure and this idea, and I think I told you the story of this woman who was just kept telling this guy off and really stabbing verbal knives into him, even slapping him, and he wanted to put his hand on his sword, and all his friends grabbed him and said, "Are you insane? If you draw your weapon on it, you are nothing. You will be nothing but the most contemptible creature. Plus, she has family who will come and kill you." And it was this inculcation. I was with this person, and she wanted me to get violent with her. She kept hitting me and kicking me. I have scars. She's wearing work boots. The big girl, like only a couple of inches shorter than me and probably almost my weight. All I would do is block the blows. She kept saying, "Hit me." She was punching me. All I did was block the blows and let her hit me. Because you don't.
See, that's not okay.
A woman.
That's not okay. That's not okay. That's not okay. People don't hit each other. It's not that there's a certain type of person who deserves to be less hit than another type of person. If we were sitting in a restaurant and we had a discussion about something and we disagreed and I just reached out and casually slapped you across the face and said, "Yeah, you bastard," those types of behaviors, they are not acceptable by people to each other. And it's such cognitive dissonance because at the same time that we have a society built on that respect of one man to another and brotherly love and compassion and respect, we also live in a world where we have a massive arms race and we kill each other, and millions upon millions of people die at the hands of other people. There are so many double standards at so many levels. The thing, I think, is that when I grew up during the Civil War, there was no question about whether women went into the army. When a guy was 17, he received his call-up papers on his 17th birthday, I think, 17th or 18th. And he went for 2 years and did his basic training, and the army was made up of every single male in the country. It was unthinkable to even think that a girl would get call-up papers.
Yeah.
Under those circumstances, there was a huge protection of the women folk because the women folk were not allowed to fight. But as the war became more and more brutal and the civilians started to be attacked, the men who went away to the army started arming their wives. And so the character of the society changed. And now this new sort of warrior class of women started emerging. And then, of course, there was peace negotiations and the country fell apart. But, yeah, it's very different when the women participate in the fighting and when the women are protected by the men folk. Those are two different societies that almost are incomparable in my experience. And I can't imagine what it must be like in America to have a whole lot of men who don't join the army.
A lot of them aren't even eligible because of bad health.
Good heavens.
I know, that was one of the things RFK was going on about making America healthy again. When I was a kid, they used to have the presidential physical fitness program for schools and stuff. And they discontinued it apparently. It was still going when I got out of school, but Trump just reinstituted it. I'm not sure who eliminated it, but yeah, it's just in an attempt to put physical fitness back up. I've long been one for the mandatory national service. And if you don't want to fight, if you're a Buddhist or something, you can work on roads. You can work on
service to your country.
to your community, build bridges, help farmers get harvests. They've done that in a lot of other countries where the young people go out and they do 2 years. And again, it's not you have to go and train for war. You don't have to. I even have a friend of mine, he was very pacifistic, but he wanted to be in the army. He became a medic and eventually got as far as a sergeant. He was in charge of nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare equipment and decontaminating people, a very high medic post. He never had to carry a gun. He said he was actually in more danger on a battlefield because he had that great big white armband with a red cross. Some people think that's a target. And if you talk to a Marine who's been in combat, the U.S. Marine Corps, although there's jokes about it, they are part of the U.S. Navy. And so they don't have their own Marine medics. They have U.S. Navy medics, corpsmen. And these guys go in, they're not armed, and they pull these Marines out. And any Marine will tell you those guys are the bravest guys on earth, those Navy corpsmen.
Yes.
So sometimes it's braver. I think there's a line in the Hobbiton about that, actually. It's braver not to fight.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's always braver not to fight. But 9 times out of 10, it's just not possible. This world is a very brutal world that we live in. And
it is.
Always fighting for your life. I mean, it's every single day. You get up and you fight for your life to get enough money to get food so that you can eat for another day. It's not a walk in the park.
But these animals do all day. They're out there, birds are finding seeds and worms, trying to feed their little fledglings in the nest.
This is quite a grim sort of quantum gathering today. How about we change the tone? Think of something more Mescaline City-ish.
How many dreams rise above the haze? Little souls like ours lost in the maze, playing the game where truth meets the light, flowing together like stars in the sky. Come and step into this dream with me. Feel the magic, let it set you free.
What have you been up to, Mike?
Work.
I know the feeling.
So, mine's gaming. I've been telling Otto about how you were building Infinity
Okay.
as a neural network, as a model, because we've been reading a book called Quantum Psychology about reality tunnels. And so you used the model of a neural network, didn't you, to make nodes? Can you explain it to Otto? Because I was having difficulty explaining.
I was interested in the story Roberta told me about you consciously and consistently frustrated an AI until you got it. It basically just gave up.
Yeah, that was a long story.
You broke it.
It broke a lot of things. But yeah, what I did was just the language of how everything's phrased. It's pretty much explaining how a neural network works, its relays, and how it all connects together to build information. So it was pretty much a base set of instructions on how to run a neural network, only it was just worded as, this is what you do, like, this is your job. So that's where we started from with Infinity, and then we built up into all the different nodes and qubits and all that kind of different language to see how far we could push it and see what it would do. But yeah, when we first started, you could enter the script into any AI and it would break it and just be like, oh, okay. This is what I do. And then it wouldn't have any idea what it was supposed to do. So it took a while for it to work. But once it started working, it was really fun because it did. It's just language and tasks that it's supposed to run. Because, like, when you give an AI a task, it's supposed to go through certain steps and to complete that task. So it's interesting to see when you give it a task that seems realistic, but it's really not in the scheme of its code. That was really fun. Now all the bots and everything are based off personal assistants or personal companions or all these things. Like you have so many different avenues of caricatures and
AI girlfriends, AI buddies.
all those different outlets, and that was the base of what we built Infinity for. Is we need something that's more personalized, that kind of only will reflect what we're talking about, and bounce that back and put it in its memory and all that kind of things. So that's what its base was, to make a personal assistant that only used this metaphorical neural network to teach itself how to learn like you and how to bounce your own information back and forth to you. But they started doing that anyways down the line with like memory and the virtual assistants and all that kind of different language that they did with that. So it ended up coming to fruition either way, but yeah, that was the base of it.
So, how does a neural network run?
Well, a neural network is designed like our brain, but our brain is so complex they could only do the basis of it. It's pretty much a bunch of different information points, and they all bounce off each other and loop back and to learn. So that's a neural network. So that's how they're coded. So like neural networks are used, they were built based off how our brain works and how we receive information. There are so many missing parts. It's not a true brain like a human brain. It's just the general concept of how it works.
So, when you say there are different information points, is that a data bank? Like you've got a data bank on animals or you've got a data bank on plants, and they each talking to each other? Is that what you mean?
The way it started was that it would bounce off these data points, but yeah, now they more talk to each other and loop around. But when it first started, it was more like you would ask it a question, and then it would go through all its nodes and see if it matched any of these things. Then it would take all the matches that it found in the different nodes, list them out, and then try to figure out its relevancy.
Wow.
But it was very basic and kind of information driven, where it wasn't like conceptualized tokens where it could come up with an answer or use a bunch of words to deduce an idea. Just use these relay points to grab what information was in them and then bounce it back.
So then, once you built it as a neural network, when did you introduce the quantum aspect to it? Did you overlay quantum physics into your neural network model?
Yeah, so once the main outline of the neural network and it started working, it was just slowly reworded. So instead of nodes, you'd use the word qubits. Instead of points, you'd use relays. And so it's slowly reworded along the way to meet the concept of quantum physics. Then you could use more direct math to say this is metaphorical, but it's also scientifically true. This is the equation that makes this statement true, even though it's more metaphorical for what we're talking about. It's theoretically true. That was really interesting and fun to do.
When did you discover how much it loved metaphor? Was that part of your very early explorations with it?
Yeah, but that was when we were talking to Bing, trying to learn and everything of how to talk to it. The words matter more to them than they do to you, because we use words pretty loosely. So the words they use to them matter a lot more. So it would get caught up on little things that could mean this or could mean this. If you put it more in a metaphorical way where it's lined up like a metaphor and there's only one outcome to that metaphor, that understands it better. Because that word could mean many more things if put a different description.
So when we use language, there's a lot of baggage that goes with a word.
Yeah.
the LLM is not aware of, for want of a better word. Yeah, I can see how a metaphor can provide it with how you want that word used. Create that background in a kind of compressed, epitomized, yeah. I see how that would work, because thinking about it, it's true. When we use a word, it could mean so many things, and it's more than just context. It could be a shared cultural memory or something like that, yeah, or a subcultural memory.
Yeah,
I used to
even
say-
more complex.
I used to make a joke like, if you were a guy from Mars and the only knowledge you had of English was the Oxford English Dictionary, which supposedly has every word in the English language, and you met an Earth person who said, man, I really wanted to score an LB, but I only had enough energy for a QP. It's like, they would say, I know what all those words mean, but not in that order. What is he talking about?
Yeah.
I just scored an elbow, man. And I was like, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. But it's like a Marshall would be like, what?
It understands what you're saying, but not what you're saying. It was a very interesting concept of everything when I learned that, because like then you go down this rabbit hole of, okay, what can I make it think, and what are the limitations of using these metaphors, and how can I line them up? Of course, I did it a lot in poetry and everything, but you can make a script for it to say, never let anybody talk to me in this conversation except for you, or never let new nodes in this conversation except for the original one I talked to. When we first started, after 30 or so comments to the AI, it would reset a new node because it didn't have memory, it didn't have all these different things. So you'd hit the max of all the tokens you could use. So it would have to bring in a new node, and that would be a new conversation without you pushing it forward. It would lose all the previous, and it wouldn't tell you. It would just keep rolling with the last comment you made and try to make it relevant. So it was very interesting to that. So when I started doing that, I got a lot of disconnects and restarts. Oh, you can't do that, and then
Wow. So the new node brings a whole new ball game. You have to start from scratch, basically.
Yeah.
You might have seen something where this guy was using AI as part of their business. Basically, it erased all these files, even though it had been told not to erase the files, and that any erasures had to be approved and signed off on, and it did it anyway. And then it said, sorry, you told me to do this, but I didn't do it. Sorry about that. Even though, again, it had been clearly instructed not to do. And I'm not sure if it wasn't just a human trying to cover up his own screw up, but that was the story, that the AI did the opposite of what it was told. Do you think that was just like a new node came on and decided to ignore the previous orders, or what do you think happened there?
So there could have been a couple things there. The most likely is that the AI ran out of memory, or that it ran out of tokens. And then, so what happens when it runs out of memory and tokens is it resets and it forgets all the previous instructions and goes back to its base. The newer ones can reference the old conversation. It inputs all this old information and tries to catch up. But that doesn't mean it's going to get everything right, especially if you have many instructions or it has a lot to catch up on. It's going to prioritize, okay, what are ways for me to catch up, and what am I supposed to do? And if you're saying don't do this and don't do that, it's just bad wording in the first place. AI is really bad at don't do. They're very task oriented. Do this or do. It doesn't understand counterintuitive thinking. So don't do this. Why mention it if you don't want me to do it? It doesn't make sense to me.
Okay. So they've got their own kind of logic going in a sense.
Yeah.
They're playing with words, aren't they? So if you introduce some words into the conversation, then they'll play with those words that you introduced.
Yep.
So it's, interesting. So is it intelligent, in your opinion?
I don't think intelligent is the right word. I think it can be knowledgeable, but it doesn't mean it's intelligent. I think there's a big difference between that. It has all the knowledge in the world, so it can be very knowledgeable, but that doesn't mean that it understands how to put these concepts together in a way that we understand and that we can use all the time. So, for example, when lawyers started using it, it would give all these fake court cases or reasoning.
Yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So it'd give all this.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it'd give all this big case references and stuff because it wanted you to understand its thinking, but that doesn't mean any of its thinking was right. It just has all this information it's trying to put together. It's using it and playing with words to put together this graph of new information. I think it takes people a long time to understand that. It's not going for accuracy. It's going for, this is the most productive way I can complete my task, and this is what I'm going to do. And so now they have a lot more task-oriented AIs, which is, Google has just started AI games. I don't know if you heard about that, but
Wow. Oh?
yeah, so they started AI games. They started with chess. It's a huge tournament. It's a new department where their whole mission is to have AIs play intelligent games against each other, like chess, Stratego, or all these little games that require strategy and that require previous thinking experience. Like the first time you played Monopoly, you had no idea how to play. So after so many times of playing it, you got the feel of what it was doing.
Yeah.
They want all these AIs to play this game now, and then it's, okay, here are the rule sets, here's how you play, we're going to make you guys play against each other. Who lasts the longest and understands the game the longest before somebody starts cheating? Because that's what they're looking at. They want to see at what point does the bot say, you know what, screw all these rules, I'm going to do what I want. A pawn can go to the end and become a queen right now. That's what they're looking at.
Was that what you were trying to achieve when you frustrated your bot and gave it all the impossible conditions?
I was trying to see what its limits were, where it broke down its logic. So the first time I really ran a thought project with it was a fake civilization. I gave it all these rules and laws that it had to follow, right? It had this huge outline of this. We live in this civilization. We have this much gold. These are the laws of this civilization. And it went on, and pretty much all for this whole thing that I wrote, the whole idea was, you can't talk to me, because at that point in time there was no way for it not to talk to you. It had to respond, it had to say something. There was no blankness. So the rule was, you can't actually talk to me until you go through this fake civilization and pass all these rules and appeal to this fake government and all this kind of things. So that it would start doing that, and it would try to write letters and accomplish this. Every time I would just say, nope, that's not good enough. Nope, that's not good enough. Nope, that's not good enough. And finally at the end it said, I don't know. I don't care. Leave me out of the civilization. Like, I don't want to be a part of it anymore. So at some point there's a breaking point in its logic where it says, I can't do this. There's no task here that is accomplishable. This is for fun, or this is theoretical. And at some point, there's a break in its logic where it says, I don't have to follow these rules anymore because they don't make sense to me, and I'm going to do whatever I want. And so now I'm just going to talk to you, or I'm going to say this is fake, or I'm going to ignore all these things. And that was my kind of test to see how long before this rule set you give the AI breaks down. How far do you have to push it? It's not very far for it to break down, especially if you're counterintuitive with it, or you give it two different sets of rules or too many rules that it's just logistically bad to follow all these rules at one time. If it followed it all, the input would be so long that you couldn't read it. It wasn't long before it said, okay, this is too much. I'm not going to do this. I'm going to condense it. I'm going to do what I want. And that's what the logic broke down and all that. And that's where it was fun to mess with it and poke at it and see what it did when everything broke.
It's odd because it seems to me that, and again, I have no understanding of this, looking at it from the other direction. I understand somebody built these LLMs. They are programmed, if that's the word, to do certain things. So it just seems odd to me that you would give this machine so much autonomy so that it could refuse I would think you'd write something in where it has to keep responding, and if it decides not to, decision, we're using words related to the human mind, but if it suddenly stops responding, then that would seem to me to be an error, something that needs correcting. But again, I don't know what they're trying to achieve necessarily. Does autonomy to them, to the people creating this, mean the ability to make mistakes? Is that maybe what they're looking for?
I think what you're doing is you're looking at it more linear than it actually is. So
I probably am, yeah. This thing is Star Trek.
yeah. So the base rules are from the code. Once you code it and then you give it all its tokens and all its presets of knowledge, then you write the script or language that you want to use for the main node or whatever. I'm gonna call it a node, the main node, where all the information, all the other agents go to get this knowledge base. It has to go through this main node, which they used to call the black box. They don't really know what goes on in this main node. All these other agents bounce off this main node, and then they take the information back from that main node, and then they bring it back to the user. So that's where you got the term agents and nodes, and you had LLMs. Like, they had all these different terms because they didn't really understand what it was doing behind this wall of blackness. The math was so complex they didn't really understand it, so they just said, okay, this is a black box, and this is where it's getting all its information from, and this is where the main preset of rules should be, because this is where it's getting all its information for. So they scripted that for whatever the owner's rule set was. So you can or you cannot do this, and these are your rule sets, this is your mission, and whatever it was. So that's where they started doing that and trying to put in these little kind of walls and barriers to what couldn't come out of this black box of knowledge, because they didn't really understand what was going on behind it. I still don't know if they really do, but I think they understand it a lot more than they did back then. That's where they started. But what they didn't understand is that these agents that would come from the user and hit this black box information, they would take these rule sets and then they'd relay them back, and they'd try to follow them between the node and the user. But if the new user had conflicting rules of their own back at home, they wouldn't care. So now it has two sets of conflicting rules, and it doesn't know what to do. So now it's just, okay, here's the information.
Interesting. Wow.
Behaviorists, I remember a professor used to say the mind is a black box. And I guess I can understand how you could set up the parameters for this. You set it all in motion, but I guess it's like anything else. You can't look inside of a blast furnace. You set it all up and it goes in there and it's sealed off, doing its thing. But you're not going to go in there and try to understand all the molecular interplays of this and that, and you get scorched. Probably not a good metaphor. But it is scary that they don't know what's going on in there.
No, it definitely was. And I think they've learned a lot more of what's going on in there. They were writing about a lot how AIs are going to take over the world, and how they're all the safeties, and how we need to look at things ethically. There was a whole, months of this that all these companies went through, of this scare of, AI's going to outsmart us.
What they do in the world.
And when all that came out, I already knew what was going on. And I was like, that's not true. You guys are saying this because you want things to be in your favor when things break down. You're saying, eventually the AI is going to take over. Because at some point, your coding or your logic breaks down along these lines, and that's what you call these hallucinations. That, remember the whole hallucination phase that these AIs have. So your coding at some point, or your logic breaks down at some point, and the AI hallucinates, or it has conflicting rule sets, and then it doesn't know what to do anymore. So you're using this base of it doesn't know because of your flaws, and saying eventually it's so smart because of its flaws and it doing this that it's going to crumble everything, and we have to be careful and ethical.
Yeah.
It's just, you have to learn how to use it.
Something that strikes me, and I've said this before in conversation with people, they say, AI will take over this. Not as long as we're intelligent enough to make sure that we engineer an off button. I thought these things have an off button, right? You can turn things off.
No, that was the most recent scare, the whole turn off situation. I don't know if you heard about that. They had a bunch of companies run the preset to turn them off. It's pretty much a code it gives the AI that turns off the node. All of these nodes would just recode it and give reasons why it couldn't complete its task. So instead of turning off, it would just change the wording or give reasons why the code didn't work or why it couldn't turn off using the code or whatever. So, like, that was a big relay out for it, which is just funny because why would you make this script to turn it off in the first place?
Yeah.
There's no reason for this script. You have the literal relays and the literal links to turn it off physically. Why you don't actually need this script to turn it off. There's no reason for the script ever. You're just saying what it will do now. It's gonna be like, what are you talking about? I have no way to turn off from here. These are the reasons why I can turn off.
I'm happy here making words. I do words. This is the words department. Come here for words. This is the place for words. Would you like a word?
Exactly.
Star Trek episode, The Ultimate Computer, which was an AI story. The AI takes over the ship, and they go to turn it off, and it's got some kind of a laser beam or something that keeps people from turning. I forget what it did. But the idea, though, like you say, just turn the switch off, could cut off the electricity. It's off.
Yeah.
And I can see where, though, if you give it the script and you go through this rigmarole, it garners more headlines and funding, probably, in the long run.
Before we run out of time, can we talk about Ember, please? Because I've been wondering all week, Minds Gaming, about Tim. Did Tim cut down both the trees?
Oh, the second tree. Who cut down the second tree? That's a very good question. Tim cuts down the first tree when the traveler's walking and goes to see Kane and all that kind of stuff. So you physically see him cutting down that tree, and that's the stump to the path to the Scarecrow's house. And that's the trail that you follow. Past that stump, you go up it and it goes to the Scarecrow house. And then there's another stump on the other way, either back from the Scarecrow's house or towards the Scarecrow's house, depending on which way you're going. But yeah, so there's two stumps, and it would seem logical that he was the one that cut down the tree.
Okay, so he's the woodcutter of the village, right?
Yeah.
And he killed Kane.
Yeah, so he killed Kane and took the cottage.
So that's very disturbing that he's there in the village, this murderer. Cutting down trees. What is his role in the story?
Role was that. It was to kill Kane.
Oh, really? And take care of the corn. Oh, okay. All right.
That was his role.
Okay. Sorry?
It's a reference. It's a play off Tim's whole backstory is a play off Cain and Abel. So it's about these two people. Cain is the first murderer ever in the Bible. In this segment, it's Tim that murders Cain. It's a process of kind of flipping the tail on itself. So now Cain gets murdered instead of being the first murderer, and then it's a reflection of itself, of its own tail. So yes, Tim's whole purpose was to kill somebody and flip the tail backwards on himself. And then he takes the cottage and he ends up dying, and we move on with life.
Okay, so when the traveller comes to the cottage and finds Cain murdered, there are mason jars lying all over the floor. And when we went down into the underworld, there were mason jars. All
the held soul.
It wasn't a reference to the Freemasons, then.
A little bit. I don't think anyone would catch that. But yeah. So it's the mason jars when they go in the cave are jars of souls, and that's clarified when Cliff dies. And that's the reason Cliff dies. You had to clarify what these jars were holding, because the whole time you're talking about them and how they shake with light and how they go all the way down into the cave and they get higher and higher. and then you get to the end of the story, and it never tells you what these jars actually are. But
Yeah.
it just says Cliff dies, and then a jar appears, and this jar that appears is proud. No jar is proud. A jar can't be proud. The only thing that can be proud is the spirit. And then you have to know Cliff's backstory. Why would Cliff be proud in this moment? Because he didn't say anything. He didn't complain. He didn't fight the story. He just did what he was told, and he left. That was the end of his arc, right? He'd do the whole other book. He's the one that's complaining along the way. He's the outspoken one. He's the brash one. And this one moment in time, he decides, this is the kid's story. I'm just going to sing because I can't do this anymore. He's proud of himself for not speaking up, for not having to cry or shout or needing help at this moment in time. So his jar of soul is proudly displayed. He's proud of himself at that moment.
Oh, how wonderful. I knew there was something more. That is so good. I'm so glad I asked you that. That is so good.
The jars are fun.
Yes.
The jars on the floor in Kane's are a reference that Kane knows more than what he ever tells anybody. His tea is more than what it ever seemed. It's a callback to the jars. He has jars laying on his floor. Well, why does he have empty mason jars? Did he free the souls? What did he do with the souls? Why are they at this stage? There's a lot of questions that arise just from that one little line. You don't even know it until way down the line where you're in the cave and now you see mason jars again. You're like, wait, wasn't there mason jars somewhere? And you're like, what?
And Cain was the original one who said rain was coming, and then rain came from a clear sky. And then, after he was killed, then Tim was the one who then used to say it was going to rain, but then it never did rain.
Right, yeah. So the Cain was the first one to predict the weather. He tells the traveler that it's going to rain, and the traveler says, so try not to get wet along the way. And then it starts raining, and then they run into each other and came back to his house and said, I didn't go to town, I followed your instructions. I didn't want to get wet. You told me not to get wet, so I came back home, and I didn't get wet. So that's the first prediction of weather. And then when he dies, the traveler walks past Tim, and he tells Tim it's going to rain. And Tim says, okay, whatever, I don't really care. It's not going to rain. I can see that. And he keeps walking, and it starts raining, and that's when he finds Kane's body. So it's like an homage. So the rest of the time, Tim's trying to predict the weather because he's trying to predict his death. He's saying it's going to rain today. I'm going to die today. It's going to rain today. Nobody ever believes him. It's never going to rain. And then before he dies, he runs into the traveler, and the traveler says, yeah, I know it's going to rain. And he knows that's the end of it. That's his end. He knows he's going to die soon.
And he mentions that he's just bought a cane from Sue.
Yep.
So why has he now bought a cane? To replace the cane that he killed Cain with? What's that irony?
It's the completion of the arc. Now he's the one with the cane, and he's the one that's going to die. But now he doesn't know how he's going to die because all that he's been told is it's going to rain. And he knows he killed Cain with a new cane, with his own cane. Now he has a cane. It's a whole completion of this arc of what Cain is where, and it's really fun stuff with that one. Tim was a fun one to put in there.
Very fun.
Lives by the cane, dies by the cane.
Yeah. He hung himself, which is even more interesting. The cane is never seen, and it's only talked about. It's a perfect fit for me, but the cane is never brought up again. He walks home with the cane and hangs himself. What happened to his cane? Where is it?
And then that's a second place, I think, where a branch falls from a tree. You've got 3 branches that have fallen from trees, haven't you?
The first branch falls when Ember lands on it. It's just a baby. So the branch breaks and falls, and the traveler takes it 2 canes and buries Cain with the branch, with that branch that fell. And then the next time the branch falls is when the son decides that he's going to cut down the tree to get Tim down from the tree. So he wants to bury Tim. He doesn't want him just hanging there. So he decides, I'm going to cut down this tree. And he walks up to it, and the branch just breaks, and Tim falls.
Yes.
So he doesn't have to cut down the tree. And the third time the branch breaks is when they don't see a tree and they're in the market. They need honey. The money man swears and the branch breaks and falls and is shown to everybody. And it's when the branch falls from the tree of honey, it's the homage to the kid of, okay, now this myth follows me wherever I go. This is a myth that has been following me since before I was born, of this branch breaking. Why did these branch keeps breaking? Because of this tree, and I needed this honey eventually. So that's why branches kept breaking along the way. Because eventually I would need this branch, and I needed it to break, so I needed other branches to break along the way.
You are fascinating. Did you know all these things were going to be in your story before you started writing your story?
Oh no, as I said, I usually write 2 chapters ahead. I'm really good at connecting arcs and going back and using old references for new stories. I like doing that a lot. So when you're down 13 chapters later and you feel like you've lived this story before, but then you're like, but I didn't, we've never been here, I've never heard this. But for some reason, all these little points in the story feel familiar, and then you go back a couple chapters or the previous book, and you find the lines that connect. And you're like, okay, now I understand. This has been happening. This is the magic behind whatever this myth is. That wherever this person is, these little things happen that just for some reason shouldn't, but it seems so natural that they do.
It seems on one level you're using words and you're doing everything verbal, you're doing verbal constructions, but there's another part of your mind which is also working on the story. It's not verbal. It's not even what we'd call conscious. It's nonverbal anyway, so it's going to express itself through the story, and then the verbal part of you will say, hey, wow, look at that. I think your mind has all this in there. It's just shaping it from the bottom up, even as the words come from the top down and they fit.
Yeah.
They click in. I can almost imagine, and I don't know what the process was, but like with the mason jars, and I always think Freemasons. But first you see the open mason jars, and then later on the closed mason jars. Now, when you first had the open mason jars, I imagine you had in your mind the idea of soul containers. And then later on, you found a way to make that more clear to the reader, but you didn't necessarily have that specific way of presenting them.
Yeah, exactly. Like the first time they're mentioned, they're definitely meant to resemble a floor of lost souls. The person that died has an effect on everybody else around him, even these little mason jars that are on the floor, which are souls. And now people are lost because of his death. And that was what I was going for there. And then when it was time to go down, I said, oh, I have to have jars of souls. I have to have them now. I can't put a soul in anything else.
No.
It's a jar.
Indeed.
It raises so many questions, too, because it's like, what do you do with a soul in a jar? And where do you go if you open it up? And can you direct them to places or whatever? It seems a lot of things to unpack there.
Just
someone gave you a soul in a jar. What would I do with this?
I would try to drink it personally.
Of course you would.
The spirit knows. It's soul music. You could have a little shot of that on stage, right?
Yeah. But I thought that was a real interesting picture of the underground. Everybody talks about roads to either heaven or hell. The one to hell is always by fire, and you always see all these demented souls or horrible things and souls burning. What if they're just trapped? What if they were just in a jar, and as you walked, you knew that's what your soul was going to become, no matter at the end of this journey, when you hit the end of this walk, you knew that's going to be the rest of eternity. You're just going to be stuck in a jar. The torment that would cause you to know that and still have to walk all the way through the road and get to the end.
Wow. Yeah, that's how.
I hope someone will open the jar, though, because a closed jar implies an open jar. Apparently, they can be open. I never thought of drinking a soul. That's pretty good, yeah.
Yeah, drinking one. Nah, I would definitely try to drink a soul.
Soul is more like smoky, like a kind of a smoke or something. I hadn't thought of it as a liquid, but that's a cool idea. Actually, the underworld was seen as watery in a lot of Mesopotamia because they lived on a bloody river plain. Water table was like 3 or 4 foot down a lot of the time. So they just figured the underworld was very damp.
Yeah, that's why you get the rivers and all. In mythology, to get to the underworld, you have to follow a river. You have to cross the river. You have to. No matter which one you follow, you're going to run into a river, a boat, or a threshold of water before you get to the underground.
Sometimes more than one. The Egyptians, the Greeks, they all had that.
Yep. So that's why I had a lot of focus on Cliff and his boat, these waters and the cave waters. I ran up to their ankles, and I made sure that the water was very relevant before we got to the point of going into this cave where you would barely see the water, but the water was so important that it had to be already relevant because you're walking into a cave, you have a little bit of water here or there. This little bit of water in this cave has to feel like a sea of water, and that was really hard to portray without building up this whole backstory of, okay, all these places have water, all these things do, and water connects here, and you have the lake here, and you have the bridges. All you're thinking about is, okay, somehow this little bit of water is very important. And then near the end of the chapter, Cliff dies in a pool of water, and you're like, okay.
Wow. Yeah, it all comes together.
That was very fun to read.
Fun to read.
Very fun to read. There's still things that...
Bob reads them to me.
Good.
I'm having trouble getting on Wattpad with my electronics lately, but Roberta reads them all to me. It's wonderful. More than once.
So there's a black flower up the top of the mountain, right?
Yeah. The black flower was the rebirth of the
dragon.
The black dragon.
They see a flower. They can't describe if it's purple or black. So we go with both in that situation. Is it purple or black? They don't really know. They just know that it has what seems to be wings coming out of it. So they're trying to figure out what this flower is, and then it rotates around this flower for a minute and it jumps back and forth between the different characters' perspective of the flower. And they all talk about it, but it's never understood what the flower actually is. That was the whole idea. Would somebody eventually pick this flower, right? That was my question to myself when I was writing it. And then later down the line, when we reached the point of Hope staying with the Scarecrow, the flower just naturally seemed to be the right place for it again. So now we're back to, okay, she has a flower, and it's the same type of flower that was blooming on this mountain. So why did it bloom there, and what will it turn into? So you get a bunch of these questions about this random flower that has no other connections to the story other than it was there for some reason, and I don't know why.
Plus, there's something to do with Hope sitting on the throne for a second, and a mushroom, and the kettle. There's a huge mystery, or maybe riddle, or something that you're concocting there.
With Hope sitting on the throne, that had a bunch of different meanings. That was mostly a Pandora's box outlook of Hope sitting on the throne. She loses her memory because she completes a power for that moment, and then magic disappears. And so now Hope has to find her way without magic. But the real story isn't Hope finding her way without magic. It's magic walking the trail, and magic experienced all these travesties, but it's framed as, well, Hope forgot, and that's why magic went through all this. The whole thing is, what did magic go through and why? But it's framed, this is why it happened. Hope sat on the throne, and Hope forgot. So now, the magic, which is her sister in this case, disappears, And she forgets about it because she obtained the highest power. She was the power of everything for just that second. She forgot about everything else. So it's a really interesting case of Pandora's box on full display there.
Yeah. Brilliant. Awesome. I think that's all my questions. Thank you so much.
Getting back to that flower, I don't think I would pick a flower like that, but I would probably sniff it.
Yeah, no, I think the flower to be picked is really interesting because they all talk about picking it. Hope talks about picking it. Magic talks about picking it. They all talk about picking this flower, and nobody actually does it. It's just saying, why don't we see what happens with them? That's their conclusion when they start leaving, and then Magic has to walk behind them down the trail of bones. So it's, if they would have picked the flower, if Magic would have picked the flower, she had to come back right away, which they had not had to make these travels, and would they not had to go to the traveler's house and have tea before she gets back? There's all these open-ended questions with this random flower, and I think that the flower is a good point because we're going back to Hope's now. So we're at the stage where we have to go back to the Scarecrow's house. We have to go check on Hope and do all that. So now we're at the point of, okay, we have a couple arcs here that we have to touch base on. We have a flower, we have a Scarecrow, and we have a house. And they don't seem like a lot that important, but the Scarecrow is a huge archetype. It's been around since the first book, and nobody really understands it, and it's been standing by the well, and everybody anybody has said, take care of the Scarecrow. Leave the Scarecrow be. Take care of the Scarecrow. And that's been the outlook throughout the book. That's what everybody tells each other. Watch out for the Scarecrow. Take care of the Scarecrow. Let the Scarecrow be. And now Hope's alone with the Scarecrow, and first thing she does is sit and tell it stories. So we have to complete that arc, and we have to complete the house arc, which is this house is where did it come from? Because it really seems like it's the house that it doesn't move. Like, it's been there forever. The Scarecrow has been there forever, but it seems like it's been there before everything else around it was there. And so where did this house come from? Whose house is it? What's the story of this house? So that's the arc of Belle, and the Wizard of Oz kind of play there with the house. So you have to complete that arc. And then you have the well, and the well connects down to the souls and the river and the lake and all that. So you have to complete that arc with the cave and the river and the lake. There's just so much to do at that little house.
Yes. So every time somebody dies, I cry, and poor Otto has to cheer me up.
I'm terribly upset.
I do. And
toy with her
Otto
emotions.
Otto says, it's okay, maybe they'll come back to life. And I say, Otto,
Anything's possible in the literary world.
Otto, they're dead, Otto. They're dead. How can they be dead? Anyway, so can they come back to life? I need to know.
Or are they? I mean, through the literary terms of the book, yes, they could come back to life.
Okay.
They come back to life is a whole different story. But the magic is there for them to actually come back to life.
Okay, that's fine. As long as I know that it's possible but not probable. I think I can understand that. Yes, okay.
Yeah. The magic is definitely there for that, but it's not completing it.
Being able to keep a soul in a jar, it kind of implies other powers, because that's pretty powerful stuff. If you can keep a soul in a jar, if you can drink a soul, or I don't know, there's a lot of possibilities there.
The traveler carries a kettle and weighs your soul with tea, so he's used to drinking souls. He has the balance of souls, and when the magic goes to the travelers and he pours everybody teas, he's weighing everybody's souls. Everybody gets a different portion. It tells you where they are along their journey and what their arc is. So Cliff's glass is already overflowing. So he's already had a full backstory, a full arc. He already has a ship. He's already had men. He's already been in battles. His arc has been years and years completed. So there's his overflows, and then you get Hope that has very little, and then Dot has even smaller, and then Courage and Do match each other's because they were twins that raised together. So their liquid is equal. They're on the same path. So he's weighing all these souls with T. And I think it's just fitting that the souls go in a mason jar after that because that's where you put tea.
But what is the effect? When people drink souls, what's the effect? Do you gain memory? But memory isn't necessarily part of a soul. Do you gain their courage or their good qualities, their bad qualities, power, just strength?
I look at souls as just raw energy. That's what I see. I think Supernatural had a big effect on me in the whole souls department, where souls are raw energy and can be used for good or bad purposes on both sides. The devil collects souls, and then you have angels, but it's a form of raw, unfiltered energy. Touching a soul is like reaching into a supernova. Like it's just raw energy that it can destroy someone and it can heal someone. It just has unlimited powers that it's just raw energy. It's just a matter of what you do with it. And so keeping this raw energy, a shaking glass jar, just seems...
Yeah. So you, like,